Okay, evening, councillors. Welcome to this first scrutiny meeting of this term, quite possibly the first proper meeting some of you have had this term. So, first item on the agenda, minutes. Do I have your authorisation to sign the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meetings held on both the 24th of April and the 24th of May as a correct record of those proceedings? Thank you very much. Apologies and substitutions. I have apologies from Councillor McKirk, and we did have a substitution, possibly of Councillor Chowdhury taking his place, but he's not here. And online we have Councillor Legg, who's online, so I just remind him that he cannot vote, I'm afraid. Additional agenda items, there are none. Disclosure of interest. Do any members have any items they feel they need to disclose an interest from? Possibly not, but if anything comes up, then we'll have to do so. Item 5, role and functions and recommendations from the Scrutiny Improvement Review. Last year, or late, no, well, not last year, last term we had a, it might have been last year actually.
It was January, no, it was the previous. July 23.
We had a review of Scrutiny, just going through a few things and seeing what's what. So I've got down here Deputy Chief Executive, but you're not really, are you?
I was when the report was written. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chair. So this report sets out two things, really. The first thing is to outline the role and functions of Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I believe many of you have had your training now on the role, so I'm hoping that this is really for information and to note this part of the report, but I think it is a helpful starting point when you start anything new, just to be clear about what it's all about. The second part of the report is, as Councillor Osborne has said, it refers to a scrutiny review piece of work that was undertaken by the Centre for Scrutiny and Governance. And I think that started a little while ago now, actually. I think the first workshop and first discussion around that was in July 22. And that involved quite a lot of evidence gathering, both in person and online, and involved conversations with members and officers. And then in January 23, we had a facilitated workshop and heard the results and the recommendations from that piece of work. And we thought it's probably a good idea to bring it to the first meeting of the new council to decide what we do with those recommendations. So hopefully you've had a chance to have a read through them. There's quite a lot in there. So unusually, we thought it might be a good idea to have an informal meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to go through them in some depth and decide the ones that we want to adopt and the ones perhaps that we're not so concerned with. And the proposal to do that is probably in the autumn. There's an awful lot going on at the moment with member induction programme and all of this, we need to get this right and spend a bit of time on it. So that's the proposal. So we can come back and canvass dates and in future, but for the time being, I think that's probably the best way forward. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Anybody have any thoughts on that? And we obviously, I think that's a good idea to have a sort of informal couple of hours or however long it takes to sort of go through the ideas. I think that with the amount of training we've got coming up and various things, as Laura has said, I think get 2 or 3 months out of the way would be best. Get a couple of meetings as well for the committee to sort of bed in and see what's what, and go from there. Councillor Maynard?
Thank you, Chairman. Only to agree with your thoughts, really. I mean, certainly it's appropriate to go through the review, and especially for new members who obviously weren't present during that review, so that they can then gain an understanding of, obviously through the training process, they will certainly get an understanding of how scrutiny works and how it relates to the executive and indeed the greater workings of the council. And there are clearly some areas, and I mean, we touched on it at the last scrutiny committee, where we bring external stakeholders in, and I don't propose to debate them, and it's very easy to start to debate them this evening, but I think that's just one area where we need to consider carefully where the appropriate audience is when we involve other stakeholders. As I said through you, Chairman, at the last scrutiny committee, sometimes it will be appropriate for the LSP, sometimes it will be appropriate for the whole council, sometimes it's appropriate to come to this committee, and that's something I think we need to consider, because clearly you always want these meetings to be focused and useful, and obviously as per the Constitution. And if you are going to involve external stakeholders, I think it's just hugely important that we get them to the right committee, which won't always be this committee. And I think it's important to understand that. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Barnes, did you indicate?
Yes, I think Councillor Maynard has said quite a bit of what I would want to say. I think it's appropriate to wait until the autumn. We have a large number of new members. I think they need to flex their muscles and find out what we can and can't do, and then reflect on whether we need to take up some of these recommendations. The other thing which I think, I'm not sure where this is best done, but I think we have a part to play in it, is what I would call horizon scanning, trying to work out where the big problems that are likely to hit us are going to come from, and what thought has been given to those. And that's something which you can't always predict, but I think some of us would have thought some of our resilience planning needed to address some of the slightly improbable events, but ones which are by no means unthinkable. Another pandemic being high on my personal list.
Thank you. Councillor Cook, any thoughts?
I think it's an excellent idea for us all to get together and have an informal meeting, and I absolutely applaud your suggestion that we leave it for till we've had a couple of meetings and we've all begun to find our feet. I mean, I've lots of comments about the actual report, but I'll save them for that informal meeting.
Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would like to try and simplify things to a certain degree and go back to basics. Scrutiny committee is only as good as the membership and their input. And I'm sure it's been said, but if new members have a particular piece of work they'd like the scrutiny committee to look at, certain issues, they've only got to speak to Democratic Service and the chairman to see if it's appropriate, and they can get that onto the agenda and have it discussed. I've done that in the past and it's been quite useful, but you know, I just raise that as a...
Thank you. Any new members got any thoughts, or are you sort of happy to sort of take the old guard's idea, if you like? Councillor Burton, I think you're...
I was, definitely listen to the experts and the people who have experience. Keep things as simple as you can, but that's not always easy. So I'm very happy to be guided by getting us familiar and then moving on. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Well, if we're happy with your officer recommendation, one, the report be noted, and secondly, the Overall Scrutiny Committee meet informally to consider in detail the outcome and recommendations of the Scrutiny Improvement Review and agree future working arrangements in light of the review's findings. So, someone happy to move that? Councillor Cook, second to Councillor Maynard. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll await a date sometime in the autumn.
Sometime.
Moving on, page 15. Item 6, performance report, fourth quarter. Resolve the Overview and Scrutiny Committee consider these findings and recommend any actions to Cabinet as necessary.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the performance for the last quarter of 22-23 for the 14 KPIs or key performance indicators that the committee has been monitoring over the last year. So what this report does is basically give you a bit of a trend, and it also explains whether the performance has met the target. You can see that in the appendix to the report. And it also gives a bit of a commentary against the performance for each of the indicators. What I would say about this suite of indicators is that they are about to change. From April this year, we've now got a new suite of KPIs which we will bring into this committee on a quarterly basis. So over the last year, we've had quite a lot of debate about the usefulness of some of the KPIs. So don't worry too much if you're looking at them and thinking, actually, I can think of a better measure there. There is a new suite to come. But really, it's just to answer any questions that you may have about the KPIs and to note the performance. Oh, and if there's any recommendations that you feel you need to make to Cabinet around any of these recommendations, we can look at that too. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Now, Sue, you rang me at the weekend, so you can kick off.
Yeah. So, well, for a new councillor, it's exciting for me that there's a topic based in recycling, which I very much like to participate with and help the council progress with. So I do have a few comments. I'll keep them brief. One talks about improving the quality of what you are actually recycling and the contamination that easily happens. It doesn't give a figure in the report, but in the local press it talks about lorry loads being contaminated, which is of concern. So I did a little bit of research and I think that labelling has got a bit lagged behind. My own label is terrible. Houses or buildings with residents with more than one resident are confused. We've still got cardboard in here and glass in there. So I would suggest that the labelling maybe could be looked at, or it may be on the programme. Excuse me if you've got it all scheduled. The other factor is we're not doing badly at all with our percentage compared to other places. But, you know, I have ambition that we would be excellent. We could remember that the figure, our percentage, is based on the amount of waste. So if we reduce our refuge, we automatically would increase our recycling rate. So there is a mention in the report of reuse, but there's no detail of how we are helping the residents to reuse. So that maybe could be expanded in the future. And including the electrical is not included. We don't know if that's included in the recycling stats or not. So that's another area that we could, you know, work on particularly if it's a good one. I think that, and just finally, the Cabinet report, you talked about the new KPIs, but the waste and recycling was not included in that Cabinet report of the 27th of February. So I think it would be great. And if I could make just one final comment, is that we talk about the environment target, not the information not being available to September, and saying that we would do a report later in the year, and I'm hoping we're meaning 2023, not into the year, our calendar year. Well, I don't know what you call it, the term, that's the word I'm looking for. Those were my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Yeah, so in regards to the waste, figures, you're right. It does. I mean, the press has talked about lorry loads. That's primarily in relation to the brim sites, where we've had quite a lot of contamination to the point where actually it made legal sense in providing those sites as a recycling point, because the material that was being collected was just not recyclable and not usable. One of the reasons why the recycling rate has been dropped as a KPI is primarily because it's not actually something that we have control over. It's not an operational thing. I mean, it relates on data that's provided to us by East Sussex County Council. They are the disposal authority, so they are the ones who measure what percentage of what percentage of waste is recycled and what is residual. In terms of the reuse bit, there are new expectations falling upon local authorities as part of the implementation of the Environment Act in relation to proactively reducing the amount of waste that's generated. What those expectations are and how they're to be implemented have not been made clear to us just yet. So as we go through that process of the implementation through the statutory instruments for the Environment Act, we'll learn more as we go, but we don't know the specifics of that yet. In terms of the environment strategy data you're talking about, it's the carbon footprint of both the district and the organisation. That will be ready in September, and we'll be reporting that in September 2023, just for clarification.
Thank you.
I hope that helps. Thank you.
No, good.
I like how you can confirm the 2023 bit. September, not which year. Councillor Maddle, I assume you need to declare an interest as East Sussex was mentioned. Am I correct?
You are absolutely correct, Chairman. So I'll declare a personal but not a pecuniary interest as an executive member of East Sussex County Council. I also think that there's been a fair bit of controversy in the immediate vicinities of some of these Bring sites with their closures. But when you actually look at the narrative that follows that, with not only contamination, but sometimes they're empty, sometimes it looks as if they've been left for months unemptied. There are definite difficulties around that, around monitoring of Bring centres, and anybody who's been to either Mountfield or Bexhill Road, for example, and used the facilities that obviously are provided by the Sussex County Council, but policed by the local contractor. And the key word is there that they're policed by the local contractor. And just about every time I visited one of those sites, when somebody puts the wrong bit in, they've got to get to the third step, really, before they're told, no, over there. So I think the fact, all joking aside, the fact that they're monitored quite effectively, and if in fact people are not using the Bring sites and then going to the tip, both in terms of probably cost and in terms of our overall recycling rates, actually I think we could see an improvement. Whilst I understand and empathise with the fact that it might not be as convenient for people, where obviously because the Bring sites were spread around the district, the reality is that in terms of actually enforcing people to recycle properly, the tips are the right way to do that. Because we cannot police those Bring sites effectively. We've seen it just about everywhere where those Bring centres are. And indeed, even when local charities have the bins, sometimes they're empty, sometimes they're a complete mess, and there is a considerable resource in cleaning them up, and you do get people abusing the facilities. Indeed, it could be said, and it should be said, that quite often at some of the Bring centres you're actually seeing fly tipping. It's as simple as that. Thank you, Chairman.
I would agree with you there. I think it was last year the Bring Centre in Peasmarsh at Jemson Superstore was closed, and so I went in there and see the sort of floor manager in the shop and said, are you happy with this? And he said, well, yes, we found a shed. Someone had literally dumped a shed at the Bring Centre. That is not glass bottles or plastic bottles or newspapers, is it? A garden shed they didn't want anymore. So they were glad to see the back of it, to be honest. Councillor Cook.
I'm sorry, I hope you won't be too shocked at this, but I'm actually going to ask about budget. Leave it there. So wearing my parish council hat, I understand that Ticehurst had an increased rate of fly tipping when the recycling site was moved. Does this impact on our budget at all? Do we pay for that rather, or is that an East Sussex County Council responsibility?
No, we pay. We pay for collection of fly tips where we can, we recharge wherever possible. Obviously, if it's left on our land, then it's for us to pay. But I'm not aware of any significant increase in the overarching fly tipping budget. That being said, I don't have that detail to hand, but we could look it up.
Thank you. And do we have any statistics for fly tipping or requests for local collection?
Or we can get those to you after the meeting, Councillor Cook. I'm afraid I don't have that information to hand.
Thank you. And are we financially out of pocket by incorrectly recycled waste? Are we as a council fined at all?
No, because what we do is we just collect. So in terms of what we then bring to the county council as the disposal authority is then effectively properly sorted, and if it's too contaminated to recycle, then they just simply count it as residual waste and they deal with it in the appropriate manner.
But are they not recycling credits?
There are no longer recycling credits. We used to operate a system of recycling credits in which, primarily because the county council could earn money off of recycling. That's no longer the case. The county council now effectively bear the brunt of the cost of recycling, and but we don't get anything from that, and I think it probably works out better for us in that regard.
Yeah, I suppose it's one of those things that one stage scrap is worth something, then 10 minutes later it's not worth anything. The same with newspapers, isn't it? People used to collect newspapers, like the Scouts or anybody else, or church halls or whatever, used to collect newspapers, but then over the years it's not worth doing it because everybody's collecting newspapers, it floods the market, so the price goes down. It's one of those weird, ironic things. I'm going to ask a question on the planning performance. I'm seeing lots of reds. Now, I assume, or I know that this, in case any new members are sort of concerned as well, this is reported every other month or every month to the planning committee. Yeah. So they're aware of it. So it's not really our issue, but it is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Go on.
So I recently explained to the planning committee that the planning committee's remit is quality of decisions, because it's their delegated authority instilled into the officers. So they need to be assured that the quality of the decisions that is being made is in line with their expectations. In terms of operational performance, that's a corporate performance issue, and in my view, is the remit of overview and scrutiny, because it's a corporate performance issue. And therefore, that's right, you were there, Councillor Barnes, weren't you? And so, actually, in terms of the processing, yes, that is part of the remit of overview and scrutiny. Although they are reported quarterly the stats are reported quarterly to the planning committee, they're also sent out. We send out a monthly bulletin now to members, an update on just where we are in terms of planning statistics. Other than your question about the process, did you have a question about the statistics?
Simply, is it getting better or is it getting worse? All I'm aware of is, I know, a little while ago, we used to get calls from people who had put in a plan application and 3 months later they didn't know if they'd pressed the button right because they'd heard nothing before it was even validated, let alone discussed. And I remember that, I can't remember when it was now. It was 2020 or 21, and I had a couple of agents. Ironically, one of them was a Mr. Manning who nearly beat me to my seat. But there you go. But he said at the time, he was concerned at the time that things were taking too long, and but then Councillor Vinehall was on the call, as was Jeff Pyra, I think it was. So from that, we had an improvement. But all I want to know is that improvement still there? Because it would, if we've got better, and we used to have green ticks, which is good, But all of a sudden we see red lodges. We've gone backwards and we've put a lot of money into it. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. So, I mean, under the target, you'll see the target is 91 days and 56 days, respectively, for both the major applications and minor applications. That's the statutory limit. That's the statutory timescale for major and minor application. It includes, and that's the expectation that you'll get from developers. What we have implemented is a significant improvement program, and I mean, anecdotally speaking, you'll probably find now if you go back out to agents and talk to them that the system has improved significantly. Our performance has improved a lot in terms of, obviously the results that are provided in front of you. What it doesn't account for is where we've got, and this is why this target is a little bit misleading, is it doesn't account for the agreed extensions of time. So where, for example, you have a householder application, I want to build a couple of small houses on this piece of land that I own. As you're working through that application, it might not be possible to get all of the information necessary to provide a comprehensive decision within the 8-week period, and that can include responses from statutory consultees, from providing more information if it's required on drainage and so on and so forth. So what the planning department do is they request an extension of time. If that's then agreed, then as far as the government statistics are concerned, as long as you get that agreed extension of time, then that's an acceptable approach. What this target doesn't do is then doesn't account for the fact that we've got agreed extensions of time. So where we are now, and what's reported to the planning committee, is the overarching percentage of applications that are either agreed within the 8 weeks or 13 weeks accordingly, or delivered within the agreed extensions of time. And I think we're between about 80 and 85% on them at the moment, which is acceptable. It's not the best, and we know that going forward we've got a target of 95%, which is a very ambitious stretch target, but it's at least something to work towards. So the answer is yes, it is improving. It is a lot better now than it was, and our overall caseload is a lot smaller and a lot more manageable, which means we can operate within the existing resources without requiring very expensive consultants and agents' fees to kind of come in and help us out.
Good. Yeah, all I was worried about was, the list of sort of on the burner, if you like, getting bigger and bigger like it did. We went, so then all of a sudden it becomes unmanageable, doesn't it?
And that's part of the information that's sent out to all members now every month, just so you can sort of see how that planning process is going. And that's to help members communicate with their constituents as well.
Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I think it is slightly disappointing that we seem to be plateauing some way short of where we would want to be. But what I've always missed on this, and I agree the figures could be better represented, because we aren't told about extensions of time. That clearly actually would be helpful to know, because it improves the figures. But we really need to understand why we've plateaued. Is it a staffing problem? Is it our statutory consultees are not getting back to us in time? I think there is some evidence of that, which actually stalls our own officers, wastes their time in a way, because they have to sit around waiting for roads to come back or drainage to come back, or the EA seems to be a particular problem. So I think trying to look a little behind the stats at some stage this year, not urgent, because we are doing better, but I think it would be useful to understand why we have now begun to plateau, and is there anything further that is within our control that we could do. I want to go on to housing, but I'll leave it there for the moment on planning, because other people may want to comment.
Okay. Oh, we've got two there. Councillor Cooper first.
It was just a question about the pre-application advice service. Will that be is that included anywhere here, or will it be included in the future? Because I understand it stopped for a while, but it is up and running now. So is the performance of that service recorded?
Sorry, Madam Chair. It's monitored internally, the performance of the pre-application service. So we offer a 20-day, it's 20 working day response on that. We're not quite at the 20 working day response yet, it must be said. However, we don't have any outstanding pre-apps that are more than 2 months old. So we are operating within a much better service than, we're not quite where we want to be, that's for sure. And there's always sort of improvements that we can undertake. But we are now operating at a level that's acceptable for most of the people who we're working with, and that's deliverable within the resources that we have available.
I think that's a useful point, because the argument that I've always gone on is if you offer pre-application advice and someone's taken it, then when their application comes in, it should be more likely to go through, because if you've listened to the advice, you're not putting in for something that is going to get a no-no. So that should speed the system up, and I hope it does, and it earns us some money.
Yeah, we've tried to be much clearer now, particularly on the principle of development, where it's felt that the principle of development being proposed would be unacceptable. We've tried to discourage people coming forward from applications, which I think was partly a problem in the previous pre-application service, where we'd give a whole raft of advice, but not actually fundamentally say, well, it doesn't really matter what you build here. Building here is not acceptable. And I think that's what we've tried to provide a lot better guidance on. So we've tried to filter out a lot of the applications that are just not acceptable in principle as well.
Does that answer your question? Councillor Mrs Barnes?
Yeah, thank you. Just moving on to affordable homes. I was very alarmed to see that Southern Housing is not projecting significant development starting beyond 2023, but actually come to a halt. And then it goes on to say that we will have to make a strategic response to this. Have we got anywhere to actually wording this strategic response? Because it doesn't look, it looks a bit dismal.
The housing here, yeah. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. The strategic response indicator is really referring to our renewed housing development strategy that is due for renewal next year, so we'll be working on that this year. That does also include, though, our strategic partnership conversations, which are statutory meetings we have with Southern Housing to cajole, incentivise and etc. their development programme in Rother and elsewhere. You know, it's a challenging time for development across the board with rising prices, increased inflation, increased cost of borrowing. So it's an issue across what's the word I'm looking for? Industry. Thank you, Ben. And therefore, it's it's going to be challenging for all developers to continue a pipeline of development that beyond meeting need keeps pace with what's come in the preceding years just recently. So challenges all round. It's the report's not meant to sort of implicate Southern Housing at all. It's a shared problem, and they're keen, engaged, sitting forward in their chair sort of thing to get things away, and we need to find opportunities for them and present them to them, which we have done to good effect in the past. I'm confident we'll continue to do so, but it's just flagging up here as early stage as possible that it is going to be a challenge moving forward.
Thank you. I've got Councillor. Did I? Yeah. Now you've done yours, didn't you?
It's still very disappointing. It's actually very dismal to realise that there's no other housing association we can actually turn to. I mean, this is just how it's going to be. So, what are we going to tell the public?
There are other registered providers who are keen and again wanting to develop in the area, who have a special status with government as a partner with government, of which Southern Housing is not. So they'll be able to more readily bring sites forward with greater levels of grant. One of those is Orbit, who has a good footprint in the area. Another, for example, is Hyde Housing, who has some stock locally. So yes, no, we're confident we can continue to put our best foot forward, but it's more of a sector-wide, industry-wide challenge, and so hard to predict. But in some realities, it could be the registered providers that are the only ones left building, because they're supported by government grant, where the market-led developers are quietening down their development.
Right, I've got two, so I'll take Councillor Creaser first, as Councillor Barnes has spoke before.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask what other providers, social housing providers, are in the mix with this, because obviously Southern Housing is one, but there are others. There's also older person facilities that clearly there are some need, well, there's a lot of need for that. And whether we're dealing with that, and also the rural. So, I mean, you've got specialists in each of those areas, and I'm wondering what kind of conversations are being had across all of those people, companies, organisations, whatever.
We could be slightly straying off this agenda item there, but we've got housing, we've got housing allocations policy comes up in a minute. So do you want to answer that question?
I can answer it briefly. We have a housing enabling officer in Graham Cornell who has an existing relationship with a lot of RPs, a lot of the parish councils, a lot of community groups, and is out there actively talking to people about sites they have in their area, or sites that we've identified that we think could be brought forward relatively easily and appropriate for social housing. So we meet routinely with many registered providers, and then try and broker conversations with the local community to try and lay the foundations for bringing those developments forward. So we are actively engaged, but it's one person, and it's a lot of work to cover.
Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I think this is an area where we are going to review. Housing is such a broad area. I think what we need to focus in, and possibly even have a new task and finish group to help with the new strategy, is what we're not achieving. I don't know what's going to happen to the private market. We've had a very good year this year. 391 houses is much better than any year I remember since I joined the council. So that actually is good news. So if it's slowing up, that's bad news. The other one, the 90, is really, frankly, very disappointing. And I do think we need to find ways of encouraging our local communities to follow the example of Eaglesham. I think we need to find ways of trying to free up, without changing the ownership, some of our underoccupied private housing. I think we need to find ways, possibly using our housing company, of working with small builders who are often short of capital, but always build out very fast because that's their business. And they've been largely squeezed out by the very large providers. I think we do need to widen our negotiations with social providers because clearly Southern are out of the game for the moment. And of course, we need to make the Rother Housing Company a success because that is our own contribution to the private and social housing market. And if the private firms are currently worried, we do need to try and spur them on a bit. One way of doing that is to show them what we can do ourselves. But I think it's that area we need to focus on and possibly even put into our work programme a rerun, really, of the Task and Finish group, which was very successful in 2019, and which took a number of ways forward. I'm particularly worried, though, about homelessness. Not where we're successful. Again, we have been brilliant at rescuing people from the streets, and we all congratulate Joe and his team on what they're doing there. But what we have, despite all the efforts we've made to buy houses and let people in, those figures are significantly worse and getting worse still. And so I think we do need to really address that. Maybe the existing solution sympathy needs to be scaled up, or are there solutions like the one I've sketched just now of trying to bring private-owned occupation, which is under-occupied, somehow bringing that into the mix without prejudicing the long-term ownership of those houses. Those kind of things I think need to be looked at urgently, because we need to get back to this virtuous cycle where the money we spend on homelessness is being spent in our own provision, which saves us enormously on our budget. And since we're going to have a budget problem, we desperately need to actually make that virtuous circle operate again.
I think it was telling, really, John, that the Treasurer said recently they put an additional $500,000 or 400,000 into the budget for homelessness. But that would have been worse if we hadn't invested in buying our own properties. So we'd invested in that to reduce the cost. So if we hadn't have done that, we'd have been looking at an additional £1 million a year quite easily.
I agree, Chairman. I mean, what this committee recommended, which was carried through, I think, by Councillor Clark when he was the lead member, actually worked extraordinarily well. And we did get to that a long way towards that virtuous circle. But of course, now we've got the cost of living crisis. All those figures are getting worse, and the sheer scale on which we were operating has proved inadequate. Nobody's fault. But we do actually need, I think, to revisit that programme, revamp it, and add it again to our armoury.
I think it might be useful for new members especially. If you look on page 23, you've got housing and communities. So, and it's always been a sort of question that comes up. Number of households in temporary accommodation, the target is 60. We don't actually have a target. In a proper world, you'd have your target would be 0 because you wouldn't want anybody in temporary accommodation. But we sort of put a target at 60 so that we sort of set a budget. We have to have a target so we can set a budget that Joe got a medium amount of money to play with. So we set a sort of a budget, if you like. So that, again, the number of households on the housing register, 1,200. That's a target. If it was only 1,100, we wouldn't be going out looking for homeless people to say, can you push their target up? Because we don't want anybody on it, to be honest. In a perfect world, you wouldn't, but we don't live in a perfect world. So it's not a target which we aim to get towards. It's just a sort of a budgetary sort of figure, if you like. But it shows the stark reality in the Q1, 2 and 3 results, and in the 4th especially, when it's just continually rising. And whatever we're, as a council and Joe's team are doing, people keep knocking on the door. So it's something to think about. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with some of what Councillor Barnes says. It clearly makes sense that we should try to maximise the supply of housing across all ranges. I would argue very strongly for the maximising social housing, affordable housing, because I think that is, if you look at the statistics in Rother locally, social housing accounts for only 10% of the overall stock. The national average is 17%, so we're coming from a low base anyway, and that illustrates the difficulty we have locally. I think Joe and his team
are doing their best. I think it's to try to ramp up supply, but they are a small team. I agree with what you're saying about Icklesham. I myself chaired the Bexhill Community Land Trust for a number of years, and I was involved with them. Problem is, at this moment, it is enormously difficult finding the funding, either from government or from charity banks or Triodos. When we were looking for funding for the land trust, the Community Land Trust, earlier on in this year, last year, the interest rates were typically quite attractive at around 3%. They've gone up to 8% and beyond that now. So the business plan of even a small community-led organisation like Bexhill Community Land Trust has had to be rewritten 3 or 4 times in the last year. Anything that maximises supply has got to be applauded, there's no doubt about that, and I'm sure that Joe and his team are doing their best to do that. Slightly off-piste here because we're obviously talking about allocations tonight.
I'll ask a question as it's in my patch. 12 on page 17. We have several empty small warehouse units in Malthouse in Peasmarsh, in the Maltins. Any idea where we're marketed them? There always seems to be people asking for sort of workshops, but maybe they don't know where to find them.
Yeah, you'll be glad to know, Chairman, that those empty spaces are under offer. So, which is good. I mean, historically, Peasmarsh has been really, really well used, that site. So it's very rare that we would have more than one void at any one time in Peasmarsh. There is a little bit of work that needs to happen just to smarten up those workshops a little bit, and we're undertaking that in the next couple of months. But yeah, no, both the 2 units I think that are there at the moment void are both under offer. And we do have a list of other people who are waiting for them as well. So.
Good. Right. Anyone else? No. What have we got to do then? Oh, yeah, resolve the Overruling Scrutiny Committee consider these findings, which we've done, and recommend any actions to Cabinet. What actions to Cabinet are we recommending? Anything? Just look at the housing?
I think one of our actions is probably for us, but we ought to inform Cabinet that we probably do need a task and finish group with a very tightly defined remit, focusing on what we can do now to actually cope with the current problem of supply. And there are a variety of ideas around, and I'm sure Councillor McCourt has got others. But we do need to actually give Joe, I think, quite a lot of backing and thought on this one.
If I may, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as Joe mentioned, we have scheduled in the renewal, sort of rewriting, really, of the housing development strategy, which will take place over the next 12 or so months. I think if it's okay with the committee that we take away that, I mean, obviously, this committee has a role in policy making anyway, and strategy development. Take this away, talk with Joe and Councillor McCourt about how best we engage overview and scrutiny in that process to make sure that we get the best possible strategy coming forward.
Good, that's good. Someone want to move that? Councillor Cook, seconder. Councillor Barnes, all those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Item 7, Housing Allocations Policy, page 27 to 112. Recommendation that this committee recommend to Cabinet to approve the draft consultation plan, draft consultation questionnaire and the draft housing allocations policy for consultation with residents and wider stakeholders. Joe and Caroline. Joe, I assume? Caroline wrote it.
This is Caroline Wakefield, who's our housing needs operations manager, who's as you say, done a large part of the work here and will be answering any questions I don't know the answer to, which will probably be most of them. So, yeah, Caroline's here with us. So, I'll introduce the report, if that's okay, Chair. Yeah. So the allocations policy is before you as Appendix A, and the covering report highlights, I hope, in more detail than I'll go into here in the presentation, the overall aim of the strategy, the policy, in terms of providing an equitable and effective allocation of social housing. It also highlights the disparity we have between the number of housing, affordable or social rented accommodation that's provided each year relative to the number of people on the housing register, which has topped 2,000 in recent months. We also able to highlight how we developed the strategy, the policy, second time, and in terms of going over the policies of other local authorities and a bit of market research to work out what is best practice. Also engaged with the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities and our representative there, and taking guidance from them on how to write the most effective policy that we can. And then we held a stakeholder collaboration event with a range of partners and stakeholders to get their views and input into the policy. So what's before you is a policy which we would like to take out to consultation for a period of 8 weeks over the summer, which is Appendix B. A plan for that consultation could be found, as what outlining who we're going to be targeting and how we're going to target them. And at Appendix C, you'll find the questionnaire itself that will be inviting comment using that questionnaire. In terms of the main changes of the policy, I don't, as I say, propose to go through each one in detail, but the principal main headline changes are that we've created a new category in terms of an emergency need, which will afford us more control over the allocations we are able to make, and remind you of that disparity between the 200-odd properties brought forward and the 2,000 people on the register. It's operating at about 10% allocation at the moment, which is not making best use of our resources in terms of targeting the resources, limited resources we do have at helping the people in most need, and making sure that the highest priority households are prioritised for social housing. The second main change, or proposed change, is to remove eligibility to the housing register for those that do not reside in the district. There are caveats to that, the most significant being those who need to be here to either receive or give care to a family member, particularly aged family members. The third is to ensure that allocations are made to applicants in the greatest needs. We propose to remove from the register band D for those who have no identified housing need. That tends to principally be those who are awarded a place in the register presently for housing for older people schemes, which are very oversubscribed themselves, so there's no shortage of people who do need those schemes. So we no longer need to include those who do not have a housing need, which wasn't the case historically when there was more supply of housing relative to demand. There's also, we're making proposed changes to the savings and income threshold, and the detail of which you'll find in the report. And in terms of our changes we want to make in order to reduce the level of TA that we use and prevent homelessness more effectively, we're asking for a greater priority for those that are accepted as homeless. So it would be, by introducing a lower level of priority for those who are accepted as homeless, it removes an incentive that we find in some cases for those to create or artificially create their own homelessness in order to get to social housing through homelessness, which is not commonplace and does get overstated, but there are examples of where that can be even incentive, in a sort of quieter incentive, as it were, or not necessarily something we want to engender in the community. So we're asking to reduce that level of priority under guidance from key stakeholders, as we said. We also want to make a higher priority for those who make their own temporary arrangements with family and friends to try and create a counter incentive. And also that in there is about the wish we have to create a greater pipeline for our rough sleeping community through this housing first accommodation that we provide by affording those in those properties access to social housing. So, as I say, there's quite a detailed report covering what is a long document, the policy. But it's, one of the main functions of the policy is to make sure we're compliant with our duty to allocate social housing lawfully. So it's important that the document is fairly detailed and comprehensive. And I hope the covering report gives a good summary for you to direct questions at us here. And you can take to Cabinet the recommendation to go out to consultation. Thank you.
Okay. One thing that I had an annual meeting in Peasmarsh, of all places, last week, and bearing in mind they haven't had any housing built, they have probably, 5, 6, 7 years maybe, there was still the gripe in the room that the most or all of the people who went in there didn't have a local connection, and the local connection was very, there was sort of quite irritation in the room that people who sort of moved or lived in the place, grew up and then had to leave, and when there were houses built, the local sort of connection didn't do them any good to sort of get back to where they wanted to be. So I'll ask the question, but it just, I know it's not always easy, just because you're local doesn't mean to say you should live there, but obviously people, there should be I think there probably always used to be a connection, but then if someone's got nothing, then who takes priority? That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yes, a challenging one. It's the district council that allocates the social housing, so they do have a local connection to the district. It's how refined a connection we go to. You could say they don't have a connection to this street if you wanted to go that far into detail. Where do you draw the line? We draw the line at district level. We do have a tool available in the form of a local lettings plans, which the Localism Act allows us to introduce, and we have started to use those more commonly in rural areas, particularly where that more micro, or for want of a better phrase, or granular sort of connection to the immediate parish is afforded. We also do in the policy, it's a bit technical for me this, but we do account for connection. I think Caroline, you're better to open.
I was going to say, obviously we need to look at need first, and below need then we look at everything else. So we look at local connection to parishes. So by reducing the banding for sort of homeless cases, that would mean other people on the register in similar bandings who have that local connection now may be more successful in getting things locally. But obviously, fundamentally, we have to look at the people who are in the most need. But it's certainly been taken into account.
I'll go Councillor Clark, who used to be housing man.
Thank you, Chairman. I see if I can find some difficult questions. One is that has there been any improvement on... I had a resident who applied to be a new applicant to the housing register, and it took nearly 3 months to get the registration, but actually they accepted it and got back to her. Has there been improvement on that? That's the first question. Put that one in. The second one is, when I was involved with Joe with the previous allocations policy, we were saying that we would try very hard to make sure that people on housing need would be able to have a local connection and still be close to their relatives. But it's not always possible, And I had one in Bexhill a few weeks ago. They asked her a flat in Sellerscombe, but that would meant the children were leaving their schools. Mother used to babysit so she could work part-time. Mother doesn't drive. So although she had an offer, it wasn't really one that was acceptable to her. So we have got a real problem of having the right housing to fit the situation of that person. And the other one is large families are always a problem on the housing waiting list because we don't have many 4-bedroom houses. Sometimes I've known housing, people knock on their door and say, I'm homeless and I've got 6 kids and where are you going to put me? So, that's another issue. And the other one is that the government over the years have relaxed the rules about overcrowding. I've got some people in our ward who have got young adults who are sharing, but it's acceptable under current legislation, which the problem is now that a lot of applicants are living with their parents, starting families of their own, and they go to the council and say, we want housing. But when you look at the system, they're still considered to be adequately housed because there's 3 bedrooms and children got 1 room. The new parents have got 1, and the grandparents have got 1, and they're sort of saying, well, it's borderline. You're not really, in a difficult position. So, but evidently, children share now to quite an age of both sexes, which was not acceptable years ago, which I think is very, very bad. So the policy is very difficult to deliver because everybody's circumstances are unique and different in many ways. So you can't box them so easily. It's a massive job, and we haven't got the amount of housing we want, and the housing need will continue to rise. Thank you.
I don't know how you answer that. Good luck.
So for the first one, yes, the time's come down. It's not come down as much as we would have liked it to, but it's come down to between 35 and 40 working days. Yeah. So, and part of the purpose of the allocations policy, as we said, is to reduce the people on the waiting list. So then we should have a much quicker turnaround on applications because there'll be lots of people who probably won't qualify straight away. So the application will take a considerably shorter time to process.
In terms of out-of-area placements, that we do have to consider reasonableness in law. So it's a fairly well-regulated test that we have to apply on whether an allocation is reasonable for that family in terms of people having to travel further distances for schools and things. So we would always encourage people to appeal if they feel that we've misapplied. We direct them to the right advisors. You can get free legal advice usually if you're eligible for legal aid, and we top that up too. So we fund Brighton Housing Trust, BHT Sussex as they now are, to do that work for people who are not eligible for legal aid. So we fund that as a council to make sure that we are held to account on those decisions. The third one around large families, we do ask as part of 106 now, more commonly, that people, that developers provide affordable housing for larger households, which is an increasing challenge. And it leads to your last question, really, around overcrowding and the fact that is still just as unacceptable as it always has been. It's just more commonplace, unfortunately, as supply dries up. And ultimately, a roof over someone's head is the priority, and it is allowed for in our policy. So if people are, and it will in the proposals, if people are significantly overcrowded or more overcrowded than is normal or than another family, they'll be awarded more priority. So we try to account for that.
And where there's extreme overcrowding, then that's what is looked at under a statutory assessment, 2 different types of assessment, and that's taken into consideration. And that would then have even higher priority than the standard. So but it's quite strict because it requires considering quite a lot of spaces for sleeping. So that would include any rooms other than the kitchen and bathroom, and certain sizes of rooms. But it is something we do routinely where we're concerned there may be very, very significant overcrowding.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Yes. First of all, Chairman, let me preface it by saying I think the changes that are being suggested are all in the right direction. I wanted to say something about substance. I think regarding Rother as the area for local connection, misses 2 quite important things about Rother. One which hasn't been mentioned so far is that urban people housed in rural communities without good bus services actually find themselves deeply unhappy. And I think some of them get quite mentally disturbed as a result. But certainly there is a good deal of tension amongst those families, even in some of our larger villages, which do have some of the facilities of a town. A lot of these people really are genuinely fish out of water, and that's a problem. The other one, of course, with an ageing population, is not so much the connection to the village, but the fact they have elderly family in that village, and there is a belief that somehow, if they move back closer to their elderly relatives, they will be able to provide some support to them. And of course, that becomes a particular problem if the elderly person becomes a bereaved person, a widow or a widower, because then social isolation becomes a problem in the rural areas. So I'd like Joe to give a little thought to that while the consultation is going on. In terms of the consultation, it probably is inevitable, but I'm uneasy that it's online, because we know that in every age group there are about 6 to 8 people in every 100 who really do not access online services, either from habit or sometimes lack of the necessary skills. So we're not reaching them at all. In terms of the online consultation, we've got some hyperlinks across to the text of the full document, but the full document is actually quite complex. I'm just wondering if something of a tight summary couldn't be produced out of the paper that is guiding us, and the hyperlink is to that summary, because what we're consulting about is not the overall document, but the changes. And if we could highlight the changes, I think people will find it easier to respond and understand what we're about. Just a suggestion, Chairman.
Which one? Who? I've got Councillor McCourt's got his hand up, but I've got sort of. I'll sit back and leave it to you.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that I commend Caroline on this piece of work. I think, as I understand it, it's a hybrid policy which incorporates best practice from comparable authorities in the region, which is really good. And I also think the policy itself is a good attempt to adapt to the reality that we find ourselves in as a local authority. Housing is a scarce resource, and the allocations team are the gatekeepers of that scarce resource. Sadly, and my heart goes out to people, 2,000 people on the register, only 218 properties were let last year. So it is a major problem. It's linked to our previous discussion about supply, because they are in a circle. But it is an attempt to deal with the situation. Architects are often fond of telling us that form follows function. I do agree with that, and I also agree that the policy that we review and that we adopt and the practice that we adopt has to reflect the reality on the ground, and I think this policy is an attempt to do that. What I would say, though, it is very much a draft policy, so it is out for consultation, and I think various techniques of consultation have to be adopted, really. That's the reality of it. But let's see what comes back from the public, because that will inform and make the policy perhaps as strong and fit for purpose as it can be. Thank you, Chair.
Is that basically what you were going to say, Joe?
Can I put it better? I was just going to answer Councillor Barnes' questions, and hopefully Caroline can answer one which I can't. In terms of the parish, we'll take that away, and we have considered it, just to be really clear, we already allocate according to parish clusters, so we have 3 parish cluster groups, and it is the second thing we consider when we consider the level of need that they have, and some of that is set in law, so we have to defer to the reasonable preference criteria, as is the jargon. But essentially, it's a protected priority groups. Then we do defer to the area. Just checking, yeah. Okay. And then time on the register is accounted for. So it is in there, but we're not able to. It's unlawful to put it above need. So we're not able to do that. In terms of online access and the access of the policy. I've done that 3 times now. Okay, hopefully Caroline can help with that. And the exec summary, absolutely the summary version to refer people to. That's a really, we'll take that away.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got some quite good synopsis of it that we did when we did the stakeholder events, and sort of they've given us some feedback on what they found useful and what needed perhaps a bit further explanation. In terms of consultation, we were intending to do it a number of ways. So to go out to the people who need us, to go out to them, to be available to discuss it. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't make sense for us just to do it online, and that's why we've set it at 8 weeks. So we've got plenty of time to do events and things.
And members can really support us with that. If you know of groups that might want to hear a bit more about it, we're willing and able to come and speak to them.
Yeah, so we can travel. Yeah. We're happy to go out, talk to people.
Kind of touching on what you're just saying about, I was just thinking about the rural communities. I noticed the paper copies, it said it's going to be in Bexhill Town Hall, which is not going to be any use to somebody up in rural Rother's going to travel all the way down here to get a paper copy. But I think you've answered it, so yeah, making sure that we're not forgotten in the rural areas.
Also, we've made arrangements to post where they want to be, and also for people who would want them in larger print or in different languages, so we're sorting that out at the moment.
And the parish clerks are on our distribution for the as consultees. So.
Excellent. Councillor Cook?
When I first saw the length of this item on the agenda, I have to confess I recoiled, but I would like to congratulate you, Caroline. It's so it is Caroline, isn't it? Yes. It is quite a readable document. I compared it to the one I struggled with in 2019 when I was a very new councillor, and actually I found this one more accessible, whether it's because I've got used to council jargon or what, I'm not sure. But I thought I liked the layout of it, and I thought it was very good. Because we never actually implemented the changes we made in 2019, would it also be appropriate to highlight some of the changes that we've made when we go out to consultation? I mean, you said you were going to produce the summary, which I think is excellent. But, to actually highlight the sort of really important ones. And my other question is, do we ever request that people who may have been in a 3-bedroomed house, but now their children have all left home, so they're rattling around in honour, do we ever request them to swap? And can we, not exactly sort of force that on them, but can we sort of be quite firm about it?
You can't force them. We do encourage them. And they get quite high priority usually on the waiting list to transfer to something smaller within social housing. But it is something that we've been talking about. Previously, there's been ways of incentivising people to do it. To be honest, usually it's money or help with relocating or removals, those sorts of things. And it's something we've got on the agenda to talk to Southern as the biggest provider about whether we can look at picking those up again and how successful they might be. It's definitely something we're keen to do because don't want family houses. We'd rather use them for larger families when you see how few there are.
Councillor Burton.
Thank you so much. I too found it readable, so that's a progress for me. But I wanted to highlight 2 brief points. One is that you mention about reduced priority for non-cooperation. I'm sure you've got this all in hand, but it is really important for people who are homeless, who may not have access to the internet, etc., who may not be good timekeepers, that we really help those people progress and come away from being at risk or homeless. They are very vulnerable people who need help with communication. I'm sure you have it in hand. And my second point was that hopefully this new policy will be implemented. And are you anticipating a resource issue when you've got 2,000 people waiting who need to be re-looked at in line of whatever changes are made? Thank you.
In terms of non-cooperation, yes, absolutely agree. And that's why we've got a lot of services set up to support those particular groups, the Rush Sleepers Initiative particularly. But yes, and we refer to other outside organisations. But it's really where it's a real case of... and the kind of people that would come under that are people who have just usually found their own accommodation but haven't told us, so we can't get hold of them. So in the end, we need a route to direct our work elsewhere, I suppose. In terms of the resources, the plan would be, the list is huge now, so what we're doing now is starting on the annual reviews. So we do that regularly anyway to see if people want to stay on the list, and we do manage to reduce quite significantly by doing that. We're also planning to probably look at people who haven't accessed or bid for a certain period to sort of reduce the list down. And then we'll have, it will be time to assess the applications, but we're hoping that we're resourced to do it. We've had some new staff who've come as part of a funding for homeless prevention, and some of the work that they're doing is developing their skills on allocations so that they'll be able to assist us. Yeah, hopefully, it shouldn't be too much of a bind.
Thank you.
Good. Well, I think we probably push that around. Anyone else? No. So, someone want to move this with what we've put forward, or our ideas, or what the officers have taken on board? Councillor Barnes? Thank you. Councillor Clark seconded. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Joe. Good luck with the consultation. Item 8. Annual work programme. Consider the Council's priorities and those of the Overall Scrutiny Committee and agree a work programme for the 23-24 municipal year. Resolved that the committee set its work programme for the new council year. So, there we are, basically. We've done task and finish groups. There's a little synopsis on them there. They've all been done. They've all been finished. You'll see on Appendix A the sort of bread and butter work we have to do, if you like, with the main items in bold there, and the cabinet member responsible. And then there's items for consideration underneath. Some of these have been floating around for some time. So, any thoughts? Councillor Maynard?
Thank you, Chairman. To say that if the September meeting remains light, with just the first quarter performance report, or just remains light, then I think it would be sensible to have that informal meeting that evening, because then we're all here anyway. You're not making a special effort to come from Bexhill, from the outer parts of Rother. All joking aside, I think just if that is light, that's a perfectly sensible time to have that conversation.
Yeah, good idea, if it remains light. Now, there was something we got coming, council tax reduction scheme. You wanted to mention that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there are a couple of policies that are council tax related that we plan to bring as a combined report or review, and that's a council tax reduction scheme and council tax premium. They're not on the list at the moment, but if the committee is minded to look at those things, I think they would need to possibly come forward in the programme, because we'd need to do an extensive consultation on particularly council tax reduction scheme. It's a 12-week consultation if we're going to make any change there. And if that were to impact next year's budget, then we'd need to bring that forward as an item. So I just wanted to flag that, and that might be something that you're interested in adding to the programme.
Well, will that require a task and finish group, or would that just be led by yourselves?
We are appointing a consultant to help us work on those policies. This is quite common. Most of the councils across East Sussex do this. So it could be a one-off report if that's what members wanted, or it could be a task and finish group, which could be supported by Chris Watchman and his team. I don't think it would be a very long one. It might be 1 or 2 meetings if it was a task and finish group. So I'll leave that with you. It's quite open.
Thoughts? I'll go.
Sorry.
I'll start from this end.
I'm going to make a new suggestion, but if you want to come back.
Councillor Clark?
Yeah, it's early days to talk about the council tax reduction scheme, but I put an early warning sign in on that because any change into that system, we currently operate down to a 20%. If you do away with that, I think East Sussex County Council lose £500,000. We lose about 80,000, and we lose staff as well because some of it is shared costs between us and East Sussex. So, although our authorities have gone that way, there are very serious financial implications if you change that policy. I'll just put that warning shot across.
Councillor Clark is absolutely right. I think it's about £700,000 to the County Council, and that's why the Council Tax Premium want to look at it at the same time as the Council Tax Reduction Scheme and understand how they impact one another. There's an opportunity to bring more Council Tax in through the Council Tax Premium as well. So I think that's probably why we probably do need to look at it in the round and understand the implications. So yes, perhaps task and finish group is the way forward.
Thank you. Just to note as well, obviously in terms of the work programme, there will be a series of strategy development items that need to plug into the programme at some point throughout this year. It's quite a busy year. We'll have a corporate plan coming forward. We've got a climate change strategy coming forward. We've got the housing and homelessness strategy renewal. So all of these things at some point in this programme will have to be plugged in, probably at the appropriate time in that strategy development. But I think we'll probably get quite a bit towards the sort of the latter part of this year in terms of September, October, November, into those meetings in terms of reviewing those strategies as part of the committee's strategy development role.
Councillor Barnes?
Yes, one which has been sort of floating around on the edges of our consciousness for some time is the way it's not merely Airbnb, but actually the use being made of some of our holiday sites by people now using for residence and the problems that's causing. I would have thought that one probably needs to be looked at quite urgently, and we probably do need to raise some of these concerns with central government. So I want to bring that one fairly up the agenda. Corporate plan, obviously, if it's going to be changed, that's going to be fairly early too, it seems to me. The one I don't want us to lose sight of is having at least a session on health and well-being update, and particularly hearing from the local strategic partnership. When is a rather different matter. It's not urgent. I think it should be somewhere in this year's programme.
I'm not seeing now. A4. Tell me if I'm wrong. Environment strategy.
But I think we sort of agreed that given the fact that the environment strategy is being effectively completely rewritten with a greater emphasis on climate change, and it will come forward as the climate change strategy, that we weren't going to review the existing strategy this year, noting that this committee will have a role in reviewing the emerging new strategy, and we could then look at the appropriate sort of review mechanisms for the new strategy going forward. So that's why it's not on the work programme for this year.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, for a previous member of this committee, Councillor Gray, who would have sat there and said, I can't see the 6 monthly report from the Environment Committee. So
well, there is the annual. Obviously, this committee received an update from the steering group in just prior to the election. So it might be something that's what we want. That might be something we want to put into that April committee again. We're looking at potentially reconstituting that steering group in cabinet next week. So there'll be every reason that steering group might want to report back on the activity that they've been doing.
at the end of the civic year.
Okay. Councillor Cook.
Yes, I would really like us to form a task and finish group to look at supporting our customer services teams. I looked at the issues raised on the doorstep, and there were several times issues were raised about lack of comms coming out. And one of the things I did when I became a new councillor was I spent a morning in the customer care with them, and I was staggered by the amount of work they do, and I think it would really help if we could find a way to support them and the expectation for them to support us. We've got some very contentious things coming up. We had the sewerage, we've got the North Eye, we've got Blackfriars, we've got other issues like that, and I think it would really help if we could form some kind of sort of a two-way strategy of support, both for members and for the customer care team.
Thanks, Chair. One thing that's not on the list is our digital and customer strategy. I think it's called something a bit different in the items for consideration, but we'd like to bring those two strategies together because actually improving one helps the other. I'm very happy that strategy is looked at through Scrutiny and a task and finish group, and it is something that I think our residents, our customers, sort of recognising that we are stretched sometimes and some of our performance could be improved. Now, that is because of the pressure on the team. You're absolutely right. So we need to take a step back and think, well, how can we help the team going forward? What could go online? How can we communicate better? And making sure we're really focusing on those customers that need our face-to-face support. And that's what the strategy, I think, needs to be all about. Mark Adams has just become the head of digital and customer, so he'll be leading that piece of work. And I'll be very supportive of that going on the programme as a particular policy development piece of work.
I think it's important too that sometimes we all speak from the same hymn sheet. Sometimes, say for example, I'm in Battle, I might be looking at it with one set of eyes, but actually somebody who's up at Etchingham or Robertsbridge might be looking at a situation with complete different eyes. But if we've all got this better comms so we understand what we're all trying to say, then the same message is going out. And we look much more, it sounds awful to say we look much more professional, but we're much more in tune with one another, and I think that's really important.
I suppose that looking at the list there, then that also sort of can encompass the effectiveness of my alerts, can't it?
Yeah,
that's comms as well, and I think it's pretty good. It goes out to a lot of people.
I think it could potentially draw together quite a few of these strands. Certainly the customer services strategy proposals, my alerts. I think they're the main ones. So yes, they are things that have been on the programme for some time as well, so it'd be good to bring that piece of work forward.
Yeah, and again, we've got there the review of the tourism strategy and the impact of Airbnbs. Then we've had another one been sitting around for some time, the impact of second homes, hardy lets, specifically Rye Winchhouse in Canberra, which is probably spread across the district as well. Which then, to some degree, impacts on housing, because we know that more places are converting or changing. Landlords are changing their plans instead of sort of, having a flat and some chap lives in it all year. They can make more money by renting it out each week. But that takes another property off our housing list, ultimately. And then you, as was said with the caravan parks, a lot of the caravan parks now, people live in them full time, but that was traditionally where people went on holiday. They don't want to go in there anymore, they go and stay in a flat, which someone's been kicked out of. So.
If I may, Chair, thank you. I think that those two issues, would be benefit from being considered very separately. I think the impact of Airbnb on, the ability for people to buy homes and things like that is genuine, and obviously that has to be considered in light of our tourism market. I think people living in holiday parks effectively is a very discrete issue that should be probably considered in much greater detail by itself. I think the implications for those people, that a lot of the houses that exist as Airbnbs are not then going to suddenly become sort of affordable housing level, of housing that's accessible and affordable to people on low incomes, whereas the holiday parks generally tend to target that group, if you like, for their longer term accommodation needs. And I think they're just two very discrete sort of issues that could probably benefit from separate consideration.
Yeah, it does make it right that you've got to live in a caravan full time.
Sometimes I don't disagree, Chairman. I think sometimes it's a proactive choice, and I think that's something that's really worth getting under the skin of, and really understanding what the evidence is behind that lifestyle choice, or that lifestyle forced, if you like, if that's the case. So I think it's really understanding the details and the data behind that, and then what options are available to us to help move those people into more sustainable accommodation.
Yeah, I speak from a bit of experience, having lived in one for 8 months whilst I built my house, and there was no way my wife would ever go back. So, no way. So there it is, and my caravan got dragged off up to a farm. It's still on a farm for temporary accommodation for farm workers. So long may it stay there, as long as my wife doesn't have to see it again. Right, well, we've kicked that about. Councillor Creaser? No? No? Councillor Burton?
Chair, hopefully this is an appropriate thing to bring up, but I'll go for it. We were talking about housing earlier, and on the list, private rented stock is poor and very expensive. We've talked about lack of supply of housing, and one thing that's concerning me is the new legislation in relation to after 2025, when tenants move, but the new tenancy in rented accommodation, they're required to have the landlord has to present an EPC level 3. So that could easily remove lots of properties from the rental market, and I'm concerned about that.
I should probably declare an interest as a landlord, because I'm concerned as well. So, yeah, it's level, C. Yeah, crazy idea. There you go. Any other thoughts? No? Got ideas of what of the sort of direction of travel, so we don't need to set up any task and finish groups yet, do we? No?
Do you want to add them into dates, Chair? Do we want to add them into the dates?
Yeah.
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 Want to do that now? Or? Yeah.
Go on then.
Well, I'd like to suggest for the July meeting we either have a report or a scoping document to come on the council tax, the council tax premium and the council tax reduction scheme. I'm just thinking about the one on digital and customer strategy. I think it would be good to perhaps start that after the summer recess. Mark's fairly new into his role, and we've got some recruitment to do. So I think it would be good to sort of look at that when we've got the team a little bit more established. So perhaps, now we did say we'd reserve that, didn't we, for the other meeting. So it could be October meeting, if you're minded to do that.
We're on a finance thing now, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Any others that we want to add in at this point?
Not that I want to add something in, but I think we would need, if we are seriously thinking about changing the council tax reduction scheme, we really do need to take evidence from the county council on what the impact would be. The problem when you try and take $750,000 out of an already stretched budget, and I say this as an ex-county councillor, is you could have an adverse impact on the very people that you're trying to help. And so getting some sense of where county would have to make the saving and what the impact will be on our local population would be very important.
Happy with that? Good. Thank you very much for your attendance. I will declare the meeting closed at 8:05, according to the Town Hall clock. Thank you very much.